Hello my friends, in today's video we will take a look at Sirui 24mm F2.8 Anamorphic lens for Sony E-mount. This is a very special lens mainly intended for video. Anamorphic lenses are very popular in high-end filmmaking, and this particular one offers a very budget-friendly way to access anamorphic filmmaking with your mirrorless camera. In this video we will take a look at the performance of this lens in combination with Super 35 10-bit 4K video on A7 IV and with downsampled 6.2K to 4K video on A7R IIIA. Anamorphic lenses can basically do two special things. The first one is that they squeeze the footage. The result of that is that you will get a wider 2.4:1 aspect ratio. The second effect of anamorphic lens is the horizontal lens flare. You can see this effect a lot in high-budget movies and TV shows. This is a 24mm APS-C lens, which translates to 36mm full-frame equivalent. As I mentioned, you will get wider footage and a different aspect ratio than with a normal 36mm lens. I generally think that 36mm is a very versatile focal length suitable for wide opening shots as well as some closer work with a subject. I think that this is a good focal length for getting into anamorphic filmmaking. The shape of this lens is fairly unconventional. It is quite long at 12.6 cm but fairly slim. The build quality is as good as it gets. Everything on this lens is metal or glass, there is no plastic at all. It is built like a tank, and I don't mean T-72. The flip side of that is 780 grams weight, so it is not exactly a light lens, but I don't really mind it. Just like any anamorphic lens, it has that vertical front element. It uses a normal 72mm filter thread. That means that you can use any 72mm filter just like with a non-anamorphic lens. As expected, the mount is also metal. There are no electronic contacts though, which means that this is a purely manual lens. I don't think that this lens is weather sealed, and there is no weather sealing gasket around the mount. The mechanics or control elements are as good as the build quality. The aperture ring is without clicks, which is a good choice for a filmmaking lens as it allows smooth aperture changes. The focusing ring is mechanical since there are no electronics in this lens. The part with grooves is a little bit narrow, but it is not an issue. The resistance is on the lighter side, but it is very precise and smooth. The focusing with this lens is generally great. The resistance is completely even and it naturally has hard stops on both ends. Before we get to the video that you can get with this lens, let's take a look at the sharpness and the optical qualities. I have tested this lens with Sony A7R IV in Super 35 mode, which offers 26.1 megapixels and fairly high pixel density. The image quality is surprisingly brilliant. As you can see, the stills are squeezed, but the sharpness test is still possible. The central sharpness is fantastic from f2.8 to f11. The contrast is also great. There is no chromatic aberration either. It just can't get any better than this on APS-C sensor. The corner sharpness is again brilliant. There is plenty of contrast and the resolution is great right from f2.8. There is some amount of chromatic aberration, but it is pretty minor. Excellent sharpness and contrast continues from f4 to f11. These results are quite surprising for me. I thought that the anamorphic stuff would be the main trick of this lens, but it also offers excellent image quality, so big thumbs up for that. I can't really judge the distortion because it is an anamorphic lens. I can just say that I don't see any noticeable distortion in the video. This kind of sharpness is obviously more than sufficient for 4K video. Sony A7 IV can shoot 4K APS-C video, which is downsampled from 4.6K. The level of detail is really good. Despite that this is not the full frame 7K to 4K, I definitely can't complain. The video shot with A7R IV is actually even nicer in terms of the detail because it uses full 6.2K downsampling in Super 35 mode. On the other hand, A7 IV can shoot 4K in 10-bit 422 and up to 60 frames per second. I think that the combination of 10-bit 4K 60p and anamorphic footage is very compelling. I think that this footage looks generally great, and if you like cinematic look, I think that this combination is a very valid option. As I mentioned, the footage that you will get with this lens is squeezed, which means that you need to de-squeeze it. That is very simple in this case. In Premiere Pro, you just need to find the clip in the Project tab, right-click on it, Modify, Interpret Footage, and under Pixel Aspect Ratio, select HD Anamorphic 1080p. Don't worry, the footage will still be 4K. One specific aspect of anamorphic lenses is the horizontal flare. You can see that a lot in high-budget movies. You will also get that with 24mm Sirui. This lens is fairly prone to flaring, which is probably intentional. Another specific feature of anamorphic lenses is oval bokeh shapes. This is an f2.8 APS-C lens, so the subject separation is not its strongest suit. The bokeh is fine otherwise. The rendering of the bokeh is actually quite smooth. The minimum focus distance is 60 cm. That simply means that this lens is not suitable for close-up work. It is enough for people, but it won't work as a semi-macro lens. On the other hand, the amount of focus breathing is very low. There still is a little bit of focus breathing, but I don't think that it can ruin focus pulling in any situation. This lens is obviously not stabilized. The in-body image stabilization is less effective if you use anamorphic lenses. I'm not sure why. The A7 IV and A7R IV stabilization definitely still helps though. I would say that the static shots are usable, but I had to use warp stabilizer in this video to eliminate the shaking in some scenes. If you want to use this lens for more complicated moving shots, you will need to use a gimbal. To sum up, I have to confess that I thought that this lens would mainly be an interesting way to experiment with anamorphic video. It proved to be much more capable than that. This is a very capable piece of filmmaking equipment that can provide great footage. Optically, it is fantastic right from f2.8 across the frame with very high contrast and almost no chromatic aberration. That naturally translates to a very detailed video. The build quality is as good as it can be. It is fairly large and not particularly light in comparison to non-anamorphic lenses, but that comparison is not very relevant. Basically, the only disadvantage that I can think of is the minimum focus distance. I am personally a big fan of anamorphic video, so I am very glad that this lens exists as a very budget-friendly option to not only try but also fully utilize anamorphic video. If you would also like to go anamorphic, I can very highly recommend this lens. So that's it for this video, thank you for watching, I hope that you liked this video and that you have found it to be useful. Stay tuned for more videos and maybe consider subscribing if you don't want to miss my future content. I appreciate your feedback in form of thumbs up or thumbs down. If you would like to ask anything or share opinion, please do so in the comment section, and see you next time.